Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley, and this is another video in a series on historic churches in Derbyshire. This is the Church of St Mary, Crich. Now, Crich, St Mary, is one of a large number of churches in England and Wales that were built by the Normans and dedicated to the Virgin Mary. They had a particular devotion to her. The origins of this church are in the 12th century, and there are still some 12th century bits around, particularly this north aisle arcade. But as you can see from the arch behind me, this is later, because this church always seems to have been quite a big church, has been expanded and altered over time, as so many English parish churches have been. So as we look around, we'll see something of the history here and also the development in terms of architecture. So here we are, we start at the west end and, as usual, work our way east. There is a west tower here. I mean, a church this big would almost always have a west tower. You can see here, this is the earliest part of the building, this aisle arcade, north aisle arcade, and you can see in between the arches there's a rough rubble infill, because of course the Normans plastered the inside of their churches, but the upper part here is nice ashlar stonework, and that's where the clerestory has been added in the 15th century. And above the chancel arch we can just about see the outline of the pre-clerestory roofline, which tells us also that the walls were raised at some point later on, because the roofline doesn't go all the way down to perhaps where you'd expect it to be at the apex of the arcades. It's a very nice tub font. We like tub fonts. Tub fonts again remind us of this fact that medieval fonts are designed for dipping. They're designed for total immersion of infants. You get a baby in there quite nicely, and you've got this rope motif at the bottom and this spiky one up there. We have a list of vicars going all the way back to 1278. I know they got one before, but they don't know what his dates were. One thing to look for with lists of vicars is what happens in the 17th century. Now here we have a list here, and in 1629 we have a T. Shelmerdine, and then we have a J. Topham and a J. England with no dates. Sometimes if you look at these you can find that somebody new comes in about 1662, and that's a good indication that a Puritan got kicked out at that time. We've got the usual selection of wall memorials. 18th century here, Ralph Weldon Allen, son of Samuel and Anne Allen, who departed this life the 31st of December 1788, aged 17 years, a sprightly youth endowed with manly sense, till God on high thought fit to call him hence. Duteous he was, loved by his friends sincere, but now in sacred dust lies mouldering here. Ah, cruel death, how couldst thou thus destroy at once a father's hope and mother's joy? But may he rise where joy supreme is given, to mingle with the blessed saints in heaven. It's a very 18th century type of epitaph. Obviously the pews are 19th century, this rather nice scroll top design. Those things on the end are umbrella stands. Put hook your umbrella through there, and checking up here you would in the rain have to. Mother's Union banner, they're quite common, and most of them now have seem to have had their day and ceased to be. Here we have the War Memorial 1914 to 1919, their name liveth forevermore, and also the Roll of Honour. That's the people who went out and came back, as well as those who were killed. Up there, Joseph Walker, and this is the side chapel. There's a couple of interesting things here. You'll notice behind the altar there is a plaque of Leonardo's Last Supper. These were made at Colebrookdale in Shropshire, mass-produced. You can find them in many, many places. Some of them are painted, some of them, like these, are brass, some are iron. We have Faith, Hope and Charity over the in the window there, and we have here a little stall made out of a couple of old bench ends, which are rather fun. For a closer look later. Here we have the piscina, which now has a book and a case in it, and also there is the water stoop. That's back in the day, you come into church and you would use the water in there to sign yourself with the sign of the cross to remind yourself of baptism. That's before, of course, the Reformation. Here we have St. Luke, St. George and St. Andrew. And this is because it's to the glory of God in memory of George Godfrey MacDonald, MD. And of course he's an MD, so he's got St. Luke for doctors. He's Scottish, so St. Andrew, and can't see what it says about him at the bottom there. They're just Crich, but obviously St. George for England. And we pan around, we've got this nice 13th century here. So this south aisle is later than the north aisle. Sort of clues that you can get. Now, these bench ends, we've got bench ends with faces, and these clearly are medieval carving, and that tells us that before the Reformation you've got these benches there. Some of the earliest types of actual fixed seating, modern electric organ, and at the back we have the great big organ pipes, and then below the projector, because projecting words onto a screen, and the screen must fall flat against the wall somewhere, because obviously there's no screen visible here. Pulpit, it's a nice wine glass type, Victorian, but still good to see another example of the wine glass. More old bench ends. And these again would have been a whole load of them in the nave before the Victorians. The screen is 19th century, but of course there would have been one here back in the day. A little arch here that would have led into a side chapel. And the chancel. We've got some old old clay tablets up there, and souls they are made of heavenly spirit, but know that bodies made of clay. So it's, souls they are made of heavenly spirit, from whence they come the heavens inherit, but know the body is made of clay, death will denounce by night or day. Yet is he as he was I lay. The living and the dead remained in clay. We have here a memorial to Graham Wheatcroft, captain of the 6th Regiment of Dragoons, and killed at the relief of Lucknow, 1857. Nice vestry doorway, and here sacred to the memory of our late vicar, the Reverend William Bunting, who died November the 11th, 1918, so Armistice Day. Big tall window letting in plenty of light, which you want, or you should want. And then up here in the sanctuary we have this nice incised alabaster slab, and this is 1588. So a couple of Elizabethan people. It's hard to see the carving there. And then down here we have another incised slab, but they've got unfortunately the artificial flowers on the head end. You can see that he's got his feet on an eagle and she on a unicorn. So there they are. And looking west through the screen, and then over here we have the Sedilia. The chancel floor's been raised in the 19th century, giving a quite odd impression when it comes to the piscina, which is currently partly been hacked off, and it has a lump of alabaster in it. And here we have another alabaster incised slab. This is an older one. It's a knight. He looks to be, I would say maybe late 14th, early 15th century here, maybe a bit later. But knight in armour. Hard to see really, but just get something of him there. And one of the great things about these is that armour, he's got his feet on a dog, on a hunting dog. One of the great things is that armour styles change over time. You'll find in films and things, they're very often just as kind of, well, certainly the cheaper the film, the more likely it is that you just get sort of generic armour. Well, there's such a thing as generic medieval armour, because armour was a matter of fashion. So some of these knights could be real fashion victims with these long toes in their armour and with the fanciest armour possible. Here we have more of these memorials. And here we have the Proverbs 31 woman in the window here. So this is a memorial to somebody's wife. This is in... No, it's in memory of Emma, Elizabeth and Selina Hurt. This one is dedicated by their nephews and nieces, so it's three aunts, which is nice. Back again past this very nice pulpit. Do like that pulpit. Proper pulpit. And here we have a 14th century grave slab. And you've got this individual, this gentleman, bearded. He is bearded means he's not a cleric, but he's not a knight either. This is quite unusual to find a civilian illustrated in one of these effigies, because normally effigies, they're knights for men, and so it's much harder to find out what men wore when they weren't in armour in those days. But this kind of thing helps us a little bit with medieval fashions, because obviously if you have an effigy like this, you are somebody important, and this is a civilian, not a cleric, and he's not wearing armour. And we have Christ receiving little children being brought to him, and I am the Lord that healeth thee, so Christ the healer. And then we have the usual, the notorious, let's just have a copy of Holman Hunt's Light of the World. It's so popular, it just became a cliche to have a Holman Hunt Light of the World window. So move slowly towards the west. We have Sunday School banner, I think. Yes, it's Christ with the little children, so Sunday School banner. And this is to the memory of the late Gervase Spendlove. You see, people say, well, your name's unusual. It wasn't really back in the 19th century. I see quite a number of Gervases in the Peak District. But Gervase Spendlove, late of Wakebridge, who died October the 31st, 1846, aged 55 years. Also Mary, the wife of the above, etc. So, yes, maybe a relatively unusual name, but not unknown. There's the old organ console. Kind of obvious that it's not used anymore. If you've got an electric organ, why do you need a big posh organ console? And there we have a couple of models of the church, one with and one without the spire. So there we have it, inside at St Mary's, Crich, and then back to the tower, and you've got the usual toilet and kitchen in the base, because these things are needed now. These things are important now, and the way they weren't in the past. And the church, what they've done with the building, changes over time. You can see this with the change in styles, the things that are brought in the past, and it just carries on today. We shouldn't think of it as, oh, these are unchanging buildings. No, these are buildings that have always changed, just as the society has changed. Well, let's go outside and have a look around. It's a bit windy out there, so there might be a bit of noise on the microphone. It's not really something you can take off for that reason. And so here we are outside of Crich. You can see very much now the character of the church is really typical of the sort of 14th century, with 15th century clerestory, porch, aisles, tower, and there's a spire on it as we saw the models inside. Well, let's have a look at the outside and try not to get blown miles by the wind up here, because we are on top of a hill. The main part of the village is quite sensibly down in the valley. So Crich St Mary's, very typical. We've got that odd angel made of wood by the tower, but there we are. And we have your typical nice 14th century spire coming out of the parapet there. Of course, in the 14th century, when these windows were put in, there wouldn't have been that clerestory. It would have been a steeply pointed roof, and what they've done is the usual 15th century. We like shallower pitch roofs. We have some ancient yew trees. That's very typical to find around churches, yew trees. And your usual collection of ancient tombs on the south side. Of course, we're on the south side, that's the side that gets the sun, and that's the side that the main door is usually on, unless there's something strange about it. Usually the north door is very much, if the whole village is to the north and there's absolutely nothing to the south. But even then, as we saw at Kniverton, chancel, of course, has been completely rebuilt in the 14th century, and nothing wrong with that. 14th century is a very good time for church building. Of course, it's the period that the Victorians really liked, and while today we can say, no, all the periods of English church architecture have their own appeal, the Victorians had their own strange ideas. As I said before, it's based upon a misunderstanding of how architecture develops and works. So here we are, East End, big window, and of course in the Middle Ages, in the 14th century, it would have been, as it is today, filled with stained glass, because the whole point of these windows is that, we can afford to have tons and tons of stained glass, and glass is expensive, so glass is, it's a status symbol, but also it's about declaring how devoted you are in your religion. It's not simply a matter of showing off or showing how much money you've got. There's also that element of devotion. I apologise for the sunlight there, but it's the sunlight, I can't do anything about it. And here we go, see the vestry on this side, normal position, north side of the church, and this is a medieval vestry. And you can see at the apex of the east wall of the chancel, we've got the Sanctus bell cot. No bell in it now, but in the Middle Ages at Mass that would have been rung at the consecration of the host. That's when the priest lifts up the consecrated wafer, and they, of course, transubstantiation idea means they believe it's been transubstantiated, and that's a time then for devotion. Historically in Roman Catholicism, it was that elevation of the host that was counted as attendance at Mass, and if you missed that, you missed Mass, and missing Mass was a mortal sin. Well, it is regarded as a mortal, certainly was historically regarded as a mortal sin in Roman Catholicism. And we have again the usual memorials. You see a family tomb over there. Now, these graveyards, it's not that they're unkempt, it's a careful, this is called the toilet block there, it's a careful provision made for wildlife. Again, keep the sun out of the camera lens because this camera doesn't like it. But here we have another medieval tomb. You can see there we've got our tomb recess with a little head above it, and there's the slab. Now obviously the body's a long way down, well, say a long way down, the body is some way down. Those chest tombs are not to contain the body, they're there to make people aware that the body's underneath it. There would have been a west doorway originally in the tower. That would have been a grand processional entrance, but that now has given way to a window. Again, this changing needs, changing provisions. So back up this way, and we can see you've got the clock, which for many centuries, it was the church in some way or another helped people tell the time. You can also see here the difference. We've got a 14th century window at the west end of the north aisle and a 15th century at the other end. You can see the difference in size and scale, and the niche in the Middle Ages would have had an image of the Virgin Mary in it. And then up to the spire again. So there we are, St Mary is a Crich. And so there we have it, the historic Norman church of St Mary's, Crich. You wouldn't know it's Norman from the outside, but we started on the inside. You can see the Norman there. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed making it this lovely, if a bit blustery, you can probably hear it on the microphone, a bit blustery day. Well, thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until the next time.